Hello, boys and girls. We're gonna talk about Divine Ire Inquisitor. Pretty much the most fun I've had in the entirety of the Legion League. Built super cool, super defensive, utilizes timeless jewels. You get a ton of regeneration. You're immune to ailments. You leech energy shield. You leech life. If you guys have seen the build diary, there's a little bit more detail as to the actual mechanics. But just to make it simple for everybody, we convert our Divine Ire fully into lightning, and we use Stormfire to ignite. The green flames are coming from the Cinder Swallow Flask, and it's pretty much like the best way I think you can do ignite right now. I mean, Flame Blast does a lot of damage as well, but it's super comfortable. It was a breeze to do Shaper on hardcore, despite not really investing a whole lot. Yeah, just extremely fun build. So without further ado, let's get right into it. For the main setup, we use Divine Ire, Ignite Proliferation, Burning Damage, Combustion, Deadly Ailments, and Infused Channeling. Super effective. I do recommend getting a level 21 Ignite Proliferation. Quality on all gems is super duper useful. I don't really see myself switching this. I mean, everybody's got a 6-link nowadays too. So if you do only have a 5-link, probably I would remove burning damage. It does suck, but it really is between deadly ailments and burning damage. Depending on your build, it might be slightly different. Definitely keep the infused channeling. It might not be the biggest damage increase in POB, but it gives you a lot of defense. But if you do actually have the channeling active, then you're dealing that 20% more because you deal a higher initial hit for both lightning and for the physical. So super duper effective. We've got our typical Molten Shell, increased duration, cast when damage taken, and feeble setup. This build does use armor. Currently I have 18.5k, which prevents me from dying to just about anything. Like I mentioned, this is a level 93 character on hardcore. I am stopping it because, well, there's plenty of builds to roll, but if you are interested, you can continue to play something like that. But yeah, your classic Molten Shield setup, you don't necessarily have to have it on cast when damage taken. I mean, a lot of people just manually run it. I like it on cast when damage taken, and sometimes I'll use it manually because I have another setup for it, which is increased duration, Vol Grace, and Vol Molten Shell. So this one's leveled and therefore going to be more effective if you were to use it. And then in a separate link, I have Flame Dash, which you don't really have to worry about it. The build is a little bit starved on sockets, so that's something to keep in mind and something that I'm going to explain in just a second. But yeah, Vol Grace, still an extremely nice defensive setup. The build was a little bit keybinding starved, and therefore we had to make a trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill weapon like the one you're looking right here. Some of you guys might have watched my highlights. Dude, I just can't fucking do annuls, man. Super unlucky with crafting this one. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal. For the support sockets, I use Elemental Weakness, Stormbrand, and Flammability. And in some of the footage, you might see me using Wave of Conviction, which for whatever reason, I tricked myself into thinking that I don't deal fire damage. I don't know. It was a weird setup. I do use Stormbrand. It does make us crit more often. But for the longest time, I was using a weapon such as this one. It's super easy to get one of these because, as you can see, the Temple affix Topotante is just a ridiculous amount of damage. You can get the flat lightning to spells, which is the most important part. And I think I bought this for like 3 chaos. So yeah, instead of having this suffix with the Arcane Surge, you get the triggers. At that point, I wasn't yet playing it, and it really helps out. The big thing is that you won't have a 100% chance to ignite. So you can get it on jewels, you can get it on the Vault gems, you can get it on gear. I don't even have 100% now, and I haven't really felt it. We do use flammability, so that definitely helps out. But maybe like there was one situation where I felt like I didn't have 100% because we do use prolif, so it only really occurs on bosses. And even like this, I have 91% chance to ignite, and that's with the 11% chance to ignite. As for the rest of our setup, we do use faster attacks, shield charge, fortify, and then a separate setup for the war banner. I didn't get to use the war banner a whole lot, and I'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, shield charge is ridiculous now. Try and get quality on your shield charge and on your faster attacks. The quality on the fortify obviously does help out a little bit as well. I do believe that it's still fortify duration, and that's our only source of fortify. If you've been playing melee builds, then yeah, you're gonna have to keep this in mind, and every now and then, you know, if your fortify drops off, just hit a boss. You've got plenty of time to do something like that, because well, you just ignite once and you kind of move on. The war banner, the reason why it's tricky is because we do use Magna Eclipses with Enlighten, Malevolence, and Wrath. You can use Determination instead of Wrath. The reason why I'm using Wrath, even though it doesn't increase our Ignite damage, is because I have a Watcher's Eye that makes it so that we gain 24% of physical damage as extra lightning damage while affected by Wrath. And since this is not spell damage like Wrath, it does actually increase the Ignite damage. And then I've also got Damaging Ailments. You inflict deal 15%. Deal damage 15% faster while affected by Malevolence, which is the main thing you should be focusing on with a Watcher's Eye. Those are extremely cheap, so getting something like this with either Determination or the Wrath mod shouldn't be problematic at all, as pretty much this is the only build that is ever going to use something like that, so you can always buy out one of these. The reason why we're using a Magna Eclipses is for the +2 to socketed gems. This makes it so that our Enlighten gets +2 gems. And in my case, unfortunately, I never got it to level 3, so that's why using the war banner was a little bit tricky, because every now and then I would run into mana issues. But you've also got the option of getting into level 3 and picking up Sovereignty, and that way you can get Aspect of the Spider on your gear as well, which is a substantial damage increase, and it's also extremely useful for defenses. Definitely something I would recommend. Again, not really something I bothered, but especially if you're playing on softcore, I would totally go for it. You can see I have some pretty useless nodes over here, so I should have done it, but I could never find the suffix, and hardcore trading's difficult because nobody has any items. So generally you're going to be focusing on armor when you're gearing up. You're going to try and get some elemental damage, some fire damage on your belt. That's something you can craft with a pristine and a scorched fossil. You can see I'm using spiked gloves. Really nice gloves. Just kidding, they're terrible. Hardcore trading, by the way. Never managed to buy a pair that would fit into the rest of my gear, unfortunately. But the reason why we want to use these sort of gloves with 25% of physical damage converted to lightning damage, and it has to be 25%, is because we fully convert without actually using added lightning. It's without using physical to lightning, because it's only a 30% multiplier. Not even actually, realistically. It's pretty bad damage. And so we're much better off using something like Deadly Ailments or Burning Damage, right? For our 6th link. Therefore, we have to pick up Stormweaver. But you don't really have to pick up Stormweaver. It's only the Lightning Conversion node, as we convert all the rest through the other means previously mentioned. And it's pretty nicely situated on the skill tree. Our amulet, I highly recommend the Temple Amulet, as this is pretty much our only source of life leech. We do have energy shield leech over here on the skill tree, but the amulet, we do use a temple one. For your helmet, get a Divine Ire enchant. Why not? It's not that big of a deal, but they should be super cheap. And then craft it with a pristine fossil and a scorched fossil. You might end up with something like this. While trying to craft another helmet, I ended up with like a Cyclone helmet that I sold for like a bunch of money, so that was pretty cool. This is pretty much like the shitty version of the one that I had previously. You don't necessarily have to use the maximum life and increased armor. You can use something like physical damage taken conversion. It should serve for a better amount of mitigation, but I didn't really bother with it. I'll talk a little bit more about Corrupted Soul, because that's the main form of defense of this build. Like I said, we regenerate, so it's not really defense, but it's always very easy for us to stay topped off, as Divine Ire hits incredibly frequently, and we do have two sources of leech and super high regeneration. So yeah, we use Corrupted Soul, which is 50% of non-chaos damage taken, bypasses energy shield, gain 20% of maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. This energy shield scales. It is super important. It's where I get the 3.2k energy shield that you see here without really investing into it. I mean, pretty much the only thing that I pick up is, well, Faith and Steel and Sanctity, which isn't a lot. You can get energy shield on your rings, wherever you want. You can see that I have increased maximum energy shield on my amulet. And with that, you might also want to get a little bit of chaos resistance. I had minus 11, and I didn't feel like chaos damage was too scary, but sometimes it was a little bit weird. You know, this build only does have 5.8k life. Actually, 5. That's not only, that's a lot of HP. Yeah, we're just leeching HP, regenerating HP, and then leeching the energy shield as well. And through the use of the Pious Paths, 200 energy shield regenerated per second while on consecrated ground. That's super duper useful. We get the attack speed, we get the cast speed, you know, we got the immunity to elements, which allows our flasks to be super versatile and nice. But the reason why I'm talking about Corrupted Soul is because of the last piece of gear that I never talked about, is the chest piece. You can get a Evolve Regalia, craft Evolve Regalia such as this one. It's not particularly cheap, but once you get it, it's super useful and you can use it on a bunch of builds. So the way you go about getting a item level 1 specifically is what we're looking for. 6-link Evolve Regalia is through the Ethereal card, and turning it in on either a level 1 or a level 2 character that caps out the level requirement. So getting the 6-link itself, super cheap. Then you're gonna have to use a dense, prismatic, and faceted and corroded fossil in a prime resonator, and hope that you hit intelligence gems. Faceted fossils are not that expensive right now, but it's still a little bit of an effort. And then you can either continue to split these chest pieces depending on the prices, or you can just annul it. That's totally up to you. I ended up with a bad split, which forced me to split again or keep the quality. I ended up keeping the quality. It's not that big of a deal. At that point, I was also not planning to craft the additional curse, but I did. So that's an extra 3 Exalted Orbs. And then you can also see that we've got gain 10% of maximum life as extra maximum energy shield, which is the Gravicious mod. I think it's 8 chaos. And with a chest piece like this one, yeah, you get the +1 to intelligence gems. And that obviously affects all of your blue gems. And it's super useful as any extra increased base damage for Divine Ire just makes us deal, I think it's like something like 20 or 25% more damage every single time. And that's pretty much it for the gear, other than the flasks, which would be Seeding Divine Flask of Staunching. Honestly, if you're on softcore, don't use a life flask with this build. It never comes into play. Use something like a Basalt Flask, whatever you want. Consecrated Flask, I don't know, it's not good. But Steep Knife Flask? Basalt Flask would probably be best. You do want the Staunching, as it does help. I do have a Corrupted Blood Jewel, but every now and then I still get bled. Super cheap to get a Corrupted Blood. Cannot be inflicted on you jewel right now. But yeah, don't use a Divine Life Flask. It's just a hardcore thing. Don't worry about it too much. Got a Chemist Jade Flask of Warding. I always recommend Chemist because, well, sometimes it allows you to use a flask twice. In this case specifically, it doesn't on a Jade Flask, but it still reduces the amount of charges spent, so you're much more likely to have another use of it. That's our Warding Flask. We've got a Granite Flask of Iron Skin. I also recommend getting Chemist. You do want the Iron Skin, as we do have quite a bit of armor scaling, so you can see that without the flask I actually only have 4.6k armor, but with the flask it brings us up to 18.5, and that will be a significant amount of defense and also great amount of HP through the use of our Full Molten Shell. We've got a Cinder Swallow, 100% get the movement speed, chance to avoid being stunned, as getting stunned is the biggest problem on this build. It's a problem that I've never actually ran into, but that is only because I do have the Cinder Swallow, and I also have 80% chance to avoid being stunned if you've killed recently. And I am also using the Soul of Brine King Pantheon that I, for whatever reason, never upgraded. Nice noob gameplay, my dude. But if you were to upgrade it, it would be even better. We don't really care about the chill or the freeze, as we are immune to elements due to the fact that we're Inquisitor. But if you ever run into some weird situation where you haven't killed a mob and another mob's killing you and you get stunned, you don't want to get perma-stunned, I've never had that problem. But on paper, you should run into it eventually, so something to keep in mind. And I mean, the other mods aren't really useful other than maybe the leech, but we have so much life leech and life regeneration. We're pretty much regaining like 50% of our total HP every second, so regen is not particularly useful. And then your typical alchemist, Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. I highly recommend a roll higher than 23% increased movement speed, as something like this is just not. I should get a better one. But yeah, that's pretty much all for the gear. Obviously, if you're looking for more information, you can check out the POB in the description. As for the leveling and the bandits, I already talked about my Pantheon a little bit. You can take Soul of Ralakesh, because why not? For banditos, you kill everybody. You can help Ire if you want, but 2 skill points for, you know, just a little bit efficient mana that only comes into play like 1 out of 1,000 times. Yeah, don't worry about it. I leveled with Divine Ire, non-ignite, obviously. That's one of the big problems with this build, that Stormfire is a level 80 item as it is on an Opal ring. It takes a long time to get the build running, and I've leveled this build previously with Flame Blast, and I've leveled with just an on-hit Divine Ire. If you're a fan of Divine Ire, you can totally level it with the on-hit version. It's gonna deal damage, you know, it's still Divine Ire, even though it's non-crit. Elemental Overload should be up all the time. But I do not recommend it, as Flame Blast is just much faster, and you might run into an ability that you really like. Flame Blast Ignite, I know you might think that it's bad, but trust me, it is not bad. It is super powerful. And the biggest advantage of using Flame Blast for leveling like this is that we use all the same support gems. So you're already playing an Ignite build. You know, before you're level 28 for the Flame Blast, you can do whatever, Stormbrand, Frost Bomb, Freeze Pulse, Explosive Trap, Fire Trap, Lightning Trap, Essence Drain, even if you want to. Totally up to you. But Flame Blast is honestly, in my opinion, super strong for leveling still. And especially if you've got a 6-link, if you've got access to a Tabula, absolutely and totally go for it. And yeah, the pathing's pretty much exactly the same as you would see it over here. You can path out through here if you want, but if you just follow this pathing exactly, you always want to get Amplify, Holy Dominion, maybe Light of Divinity. Precision is super useful. Devotion helps out if you're having survivability problems. Maybe you're actually playing on hardcore. Again, I typically path out through here and make a circle over there. You're not going to be using the Glorious Vanity from the very beginning, but you can get Divine Judgment, you can get Divine Wrath. Spiritual Aid is a lot of damage. For sure, and then you have access to Holy Fire, which is very useful early on, chance to ignite, and it also makes it so that you just deal a ton more damage, and you just path through the top, get into Heart of Flame, get into Breath of Flame, try and get Breath of Flame as fast as possible for that chance to ignite, as the combustion might not be enough, and you pretty much know the story early from there on. Elemental Equilibrium, not a problem. Don't pick it up until you're actually playing Stormfire, as it isn't particularly efficient unless you're willing to use like another ability after every time you ignite or something like that. I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, try and get as best Glorious Vanity as you can. It does randomize the passives, as you probably already know. I got Chance to Shock, Critical Strike Multiplier, Fire Damage over here, increased Minion Damage over here, Curse Effect or Aura Effect, increased Chaos Damage, not very useful. Minion Damage, which is useful due to Spiritual Aid, Fire Damage over here, Evasion, Fire Resistance. It's nothing crazy. I didn't search for one of these for particularly long. But yeah, check out the POB for in the description for all of the information that I might have forgotten or you might have missed. And yeah, most fun build that I've played in a long time. If you're a fan of Ignites, this is the one for you. Thanks very much for watching. Appreciate you guys. Bye. God damn it, Benji.